Okay, so hello. This is going to be Hacking Verbal Communication Systems, so if you're not here for that talk, you might be in the wrong place. I'm going to do a quick bit of housekeeping. First of all, my name is Ryan Alexander. My pronouns are he and him. I am the lead backend developer for a cross-functional Ruby on Rails team based in London, but I grew up right here in Minneapolis, which is why I don't sound much like I'm from London. It sounds like I'm from here. In fact, I went to South High School, and I went to the U of M, where I got a highly technical degree in music theory and composition. Applying. Here is how to get a hold of me. Please note, you don't have to capitalize the RNA part. That's just for clarity. I'm on Twitter and on email. There's a hashtag that I've put in the little corner. You can use that specifically if you want to give me some talk about the talk on social medias. I believe that both the slides and a video of this talk will be going up about within a month of the conference. They're going to handle that. And even better, I'm being live streamed. So if you want to reference them, please do that. And please do get a hold of me. This is only the second time I have given this talk. The first time was about 3 years ago at the Lead Developer Conference in London. I really thought it would kind of be a one-off thing, but the feedback that I got, and continue to get, in fact, someone talked to me about this talk literally 4 days ago, and it really made me super happy, has been really encouraging, and it's the reason why I thought to apply to give this talk again. I've been putting a lot more content in, and I'm kind of doing a deep dive on a number of things that I just didn't get a chance to go through before the first time. And I would really like to encourage all of you to give me that feedback. It's really encouraging for me. It's probably true of every speaker you're going to see at the conference, but in particular, it's been really helpful for me. I also want to say that I really like being at a conference with a strong code of conduct. That means a lot to me. And in particular, if there is anything in my talk that you find might be othering or not welcoming, I really want to know about it so I can not do it again. That is super important. And also, if you have feedback, think might be better, everything like that, I'd love to hear it, because it looks like this is something that's helped people, and I'd like it to continue to help people, and I don't want anything to get in the way of that. All right. I would like to talk to you about how to improve our conversations. This is what Google gives me as a definition of conversation. The word I would really like for all of us to pay attention to in the definition is exchanged. Conversations are not meant to be a one-way thing. They are made up of multiple ideas. If we want to bring these diverse sets of expertise on our teams to bear on our goals, individuals don't just need to be heard, their ideas need to interact. There needs to be a back and forth, and a lot of the time that's going to be happening through conversations. And specifically, what I want to talk about is how that back and forth happens. So I'm going to take two related systems, and I'm going to dive into them. The first one is flow control, by which I mean who's getting to talk, when do they get to talk, and how is that being determined. And the second one is going to be consensus modeling, which is how we figure out what the group wants. Let's start with flow control. How does everyone in a conversation determine who's going to talk and when? The short answer is that we all do, kind of, but we do it collectively, and the person actively talking tends to have more of the decision-making power. In fact, we're even doing it right now. This is a one-way conversation, and I appreciate the irony of doing a one-way conversation about having multiple ways conversations. It's not lost on me. But there's still feedback happening. I'm looking at all of you, and I'm paying attention to your physicality. I'm seeing if you're looking at me, if you're smiling, if you're nodding. Really appreciate it. It lets me know what's going on. What's your physicality like? The longer answer is where we start to think about things that we can hack, things we can make better, and that's this. Everyone at the same time is running an algorithm in their head about who should talk and when, and then communicating our own idea of what that should be through body language, short signals, facial expressions, a lot of different things. If that sounds like a mess, it is. It works most of the time, kind of, for some people better than for others. And I think an example might help here, so let's go to Ireland. When I was 19 years old, I had saved up enough money to travel around Europe for about 3 months on the cheap. I also had a friend who'd moved to Paris and offered to put me up, so the stars were aligned. I had a chance to go around the UK, France, made it to the Netherlands, made it to Germany. But in Ireland, something really odd happened. And I have to be specific about this. It's not all of Ireland. It was just this one little village, a place called Bunclody. You can see it on the map. That's where I first started to become aware of our flow control systems. Also, this was a long time ago, so if you decide to take a trip to Bunclody and it doesn't happen, please don't at me. I couldn't hold a conversation. I'd try, but every time I started talking, I'd go for a little bit and then suddenly stop. This happened all night. The other locals I was speaking with were just as surprised, and to be clear, they had no problem talking to each other. This was clearly a combination of me and them. For the life of me, I couldn't figure out what was happening. I'd figure it out later, but it had to do with conversational flow control. So here's what happened. I'd just be sitting in the pub, be chatting with someone. I'd say, hey, yeah, I'm from Minneapolis. I'm doing a bit of traveling, just kind of looking around. I brought my saxophone with me, going to try a little bit of busking. Oh, sorry, did you want to? Oh, sorry. Okay. So yeah, and I've been in Ireland for about a week. I really like it. It's so beautiful out here. I mean, it's just such a great chance to, oh, did you? Oh, sorry, yeah, no, what you can't see in that demonstration is what the other person was doing, so I'm going to show you real quick. They were doing this. When I would nod, when I'd be talking, they'd go like this. Oh. 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 They were doing a sharp intake of breath. Now, for them, that was their, hey, go ahead, keep talking, I'm paying attention, I'm into this signal. But for me, culturally, that was, I really need to say something really quick, can I just get in there for a second? And of course, so when I saw that signal, I went, hey, no problem, buddy, tell me what's going on. And they were like, why did you do that? I just gave you the let's keep talking. And all of this was happening only semi-consciously, and it was really confusing. That person's acknowledgement signal was my request to interrupt. And I was even asking for that with my inquisitive head nod. Even better, they were understanding that and giving their own standard act, but it was messing me up. And so all night, my conversations stopped and started like a person driving stick shift who'd only ever driven automatic. And that was when I started to realize something really important about our algorithms. We have different algorithms. We tend to think that we have the same algorithms, but we really don't. In fact, sometimes they can be so different that they start to seriously interfere, like in Bunclody. Now, in the case of Bunclody, it was a really clear example of it just wrecking the conversational flow. But with systems like this, they often just keep working even when there's conflicts. And we tend not to notice that it's just not being as optimal. To be fair, sometimes we don't even have a shared opinion on what is really optimal for a conversation. Even if we did have the same algorithms, we would all be working from radically different sets of information, highly subjective estimates of the importance of what is to be said and by whom. In general, we all think what we have to say is pretty important. Okay, quick confession. This is not an original hack. Most of us have been doing a version of this hack since we were kids. In fact, that childhood association is something that makes some of us a bit more reluctant to take it on because it kind of feels inequitable. But I'm going to try to convince you that it's worth doing. And here they are. These are the Occupy Together hand signals. I'm going to give you a little bit of history about them. The Occupy movement did not invent these signals either. These were actually adopted from Quakers, who have been using them for a long time in some of their large group meetings. There are basically 8 symbols. The Occupy movement took them on because they were put into a very interesting situation. Some of the protests had local ordinances passed to try to keep them silent and to make it more difficult for them to organize their protests. Specifically, they had artificial amplification banned. They couldn't have done this. So they adopted something called a human megaphone, which meant that one person would talk, and then people who were standing kind of just at the range of hearing would then repeat that for people who were further out. This, of course, completely broke the flow of conversation, and they needed something to allow there to be interactions. Real quick, there's 4 symbols for flow control, speaking, and 4 symbols for consensus modeling, feeling. The first one is just this. This is the one that looks familiar. It's like you're back in school. It means I want to talk next. I want to bring up the next topic. Next big thing, I would like to speak. There's this one, which is I would like to speak on the topic that is currently being spoken about. I would like to contribute. I want to go into the conversation. There's this one, which is my favorite one. This is clarification. This is I want you to keep talking, and I want to keep participating, but I don't understand something, and I need you to explain it to me. The example I give for this is someone's just used an acronym, you have no idea what they're talking about. You don't want them to stop, but you really need to find out. This one. This one usually gets addressed right away because it's basically keep the conversation flow, but let's get everyone in it. And there's this one, which is basically, you're meandering a bit. Can you stay on topic? The other 4 are the feeling ones. So they're like, I don't like it. I do like it. This is great. I oppose this, and this one, which is, you need to stop talking because I need to get out of here. Something you're talking about, conversation needs to stop for some reason. In a professional setting, you are rarely going to see this, and hopefully you're not going to get into a situation where you see this. But do everyone a favor and leave them in, because this and this can be a safety net for people who might not have another way to express that this conversation has gone into a difficult territory. And remember, your algorithms are not the same as other people's. You do not know what might make somebody else need to get out of a conversation. One of the other things that's really nice is that this one gives you a chance to do something that you don't usually get to do in a conversation, which is you have a positive cutout. If everyone in the room is going like this, guess what? You can shut up. You got there. It's great. This is really useful for people who might be prone to over-explaining or might even have anxiety issues and can't pick up that people are in agreement with them. Super helpful and keeps them from falling into the trap where they've gotten that optimal consensus and now they're starting to erode it by talking too much afterwards. Not that I ever do that. To illustrate how these symbols can help conversations, and we'll take a look at and we're going to take a look at what I like to think are 2 of the major flaws in kind of our collective native algorithms, and they are race conditions and jerks. I'm actually really pleased. I made this slide. I changed it from the original one. I used a slightly more crude word than jerks, and I've found out since that this entire track has jerks as a theme, and I'm super happy about that, so I lied. At any rate, race conditions. We will, as part of a conversation, put in small or longer pauses to indicate that we either want an acknowledgement or that we're done talking, sometimes other things. We also sometimes don't put those pauses in as a way to barrel through and try to keep people from interrupting us. And when we do it, people get really nervous and, oh my God, why haven't you given me a pause? I really want to say something. What kind of jerk are you? So it works both ways. Also, this is one of the reasons why public speaking is so scary for us. Because right now, I know that I am breaking an unspoken contract, which is I'm trying to have a conversation with you, and I am never giving you the stick. And I inherently feel a bit like a jerk for doing it. These pauses that we put into conversation represent a starting pistol scenario, a race condition. Once they're fired, the race is on. But what if it takes an extra second or 2 for those signals to reach somebody else in the conversation? These are short pauses, and even a small bit of latency can screw things up. You can see this happening when 2 groups of people are talking over remote connections, and you can really see it happening when you have 2 or more small groups of people talking over one of those magic windows. You've ever been like in an office that's connected to another office? Have you watched how conversation works when that happens? In general, it's bada 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 bada, big pause, oh, we're done, and then woof, I've got the stick, bada 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 bada. Which is ironic because when they put those things in, almost always what you want is for them to talk to each other as much as possible. But that's not what happens, because the people on one side of that magic window have this inherent advantage in the race condition. They can pick up the token faster than anybody else can. The symbol hack mitigates this problem by removing the starting pistol. You can put up your hand at the moment you realize you want to either enter the flow of conversation. And you can do that because you don't have to interrupt the conversation itself to publish that signal. It also helps you listen because you can spend more attention to the content of what is being said and less attention on trying to catch when that pause is just going to come up and be ready off the starting point. But even when everyone's hearing that same starting point at the same time, some of us are just faster off the mark. In fact, some of us won't even wait for the pistol, which brings us to the jerks. Just to be clear, not everyone who is good at interrupting is a jerk, but interrupting someone else is kind of a jerk thing to do. Even worse, when someone jumps that starting pistol, everyone else just doesn't even bother to try and signal. They just invisibly go back to waiting again. We only see the current speaker being stepped on, not all the people who were waiting to talk. And those are disproportionately the more marginalized voices. And again, this is where the symbols can help in 3 ways. They mean you don't have to step on somebody else's speech to make your bid to enter the conversation. They allow everyone to see all of the people who might wish to speak. This also moves into consensus modeling a bit because when you see how many people are waiting to speak, it can give you a sense of the group really wants to pause and get a little bit more down with this conversation. And they also require you to classify the nature of your interrupt. This is one of my favorite things. So that someone who needs clarification within the current context can be prioritized over someone who just wants to talk about this thing or someone who just wants to move on to the next thing. And a lot of us, we kind of do that prioritization already with physicality. We kind of take it as the more someone looks like they need to pee, the more we think it's a C. I did not intend that to rhyme, seriously. Good ideas and concepts do not magically imbue their originators with the power to elegantly and effectively insert them into the flow of conversation. Interrupting is a skill, and it is a skill that throughout their lives, some people are rewarded for doing and others are punished for doing. Even worse, those determinations of who gets rewarded and who gets punished fall along some very sexist and racist lines. Just letting the person who's good at interrupting go ahead and interrupt in no way guarantees a better conversation and stands a very good chance of perpetuating some very crappy inequities. All right, let's talk about consensus modeling. One of the tricky things about this topic is that for any given conversation, there's usually 2 layers of consensus going on. The first layer is the obvious one. That's the one that we're actually talking about using the hands for, and that's the, do we agree on the topic? Are we with it? Are we not with it? Do we oppose it? All that stuff. That's the first one. There's actually not a lot to cover on that one. But there's a second layer that is not so straightforward. And that's where these hand signs start to signal up a more clear level. Do we agree? Do we not agree? But that second layer of conversation is, are we fine to keep talking about this? Do we want to talk about something else? That's where those second set of symbols start to do kind of a bit of double duty. Normally in a conversation, both of these consensus signals are sent via body language and tone of voice. Sometimes when things get to a head, we'll move them along with an explicit statement. Okay, can we wrap this up? We need to decide soon. I don't care, put mushrooms on the whole thing, I'll just pick them off myself. These symbols are like a subtitle track for the physicality thread, which is important because these sets of physical signs can also be culturally different, like in Bunclody. Now, just to be clear, these subtitles, these symbols don't replace those physical signs, but rather they are overlaying them. And that overlay doesn't just help in situations of culturally different symbols. Many neurodiverse people find it much more difficult to parse body language. And doing so in a real-time fashion in order to incorporate that feedback into these signals and use them to navigate the conversational flow is extra hard. And as a result, they don't get the same chance to participate. I'm pretty sure I'm preaching to the choir here in this room, but just in case someone further afield is watching this on the live stream or a video recording, if you work in technology and you think that you don't work with neurodiverse people, or worse, you do, and you think that it's not up to you to make your workplace more inclusive of them, you are part of the problem. Okay, home stretch. How are we doing? Yay! A couple of points that I'd like to kind of cover about implementing this, things that you keep in mind. You can do this with an explicit facilitator. Pretty much everyone here has worked with a Scrum Master, right? So you're familiar with the concept of someone who's kind of there to facilitate a process, to, shepherd things. And conversations are a process. These symbols work great for someone acting in the role of a facilitator. In fact, it can make their job easier in a way that means more people might be able to take on that role in the first place. Although to some extent, the same principle of the, in retrospectives, though they shouldn't be run by someone who has a, an opinion, the uninvolved should run the retrospective, also applies here. One of the things about the implementation of the Occupy hand signals, and that works with explicit facilitators, although we can also be mindful of it, is something called the progressive stack. So the progressive stack is an attempt to be explicit about bringing out marginalized voices. It's pretty simple. You just pick the people you haven't heard from first. And in the case of a lot of people you haven't heard from first, you pick the people who you think you most haven't heard from historically first. It's really, really, really easy. Now, again, keep in mind, this is less of a problem when you do this because the people who have put their hands up have also volunteered. You do sometimes want to be mindful of the fact that some people don't want to participate. And calling people out to participate when they don't want to participate can also be a negative thing. But if they put their hand up, it's usually a good sign that, they're good to go. Every system has its limitations. If someone in your group can't see the people raising their hands, or if you're on an audio-only connection, these symbols won't help you. If you have an active chat room as part of your audio connection, like Slack does, you can use the symbols or similar in the room as part of how you're doing the conversation. There are, in fact, a number of bots that have been written to kind of manage this, and they will even implement some form of the progressive stack. At the very least, they can do things like make sure that when someone raises their hand, if it's someone who has not yet taken a turn at the wheel, that they can be popped to the top of the list. These hand signals are just one of a load of formal conversational flow systems. Each of these other systems will also offer some of the same benefits. That being said, one of the things that I like about the hand symbols is that they're pretty simple. Try to keep things light, and be wary of the person who tries to get you to go full Robert's Rules of Order, because usually they'll be the only person in the room who knows how to use Robert's Rules of Order, and that means they're just trying to trade one advantage for another. I went through these a little bit faster than I expected. That's okay. I have kind of a twist ending for you on this. I've actually been hacking you with this conversation. Those semi-conscious algorithms that I talked about, they're adaptive, just like us. Literally just introducing the concept that different kinds of interrupts should be prioritized over others means that concept will, to some extent, get rolled into your algorithms and the algorithms of anyone else that you talk about this with. It opens up questions like, did you need clarification or did you want to move on to another topic? An easier question to ask, a valuable question to ask, but a lot easier to ask when they already understand what you mean by it. Remember Bunklody? Next day in Bunklody, when I woke up, all of a sudden I had the conversations just fine. I adapted. My brain figured it out. And most of us will do it the same. Because of that adaptation, a lot of these techniques can become self-obsoleting. Using them over time builds better conversational habits, and eventually you'll find that the formal systems become less needed. But do remember that if somebody new comes in, they won't have that same experience or context. They also won't have the adaptations that have now occurred in your algorithm from incorporating these signals. So be ready to fall back to something more explicit to help them. Don't let your new system become a secret handshake, because that can suddenly make this whole thing have the exact opposite effect. As people come in and have even more of a disconnect as to how to come into a conversation, their algorithm is so different from yours. Don't make the new people have to figure it out through guesswork. Give them signposts, give them directions. Everyone brings value. Be intentional about your culture, and you'll get more of it. Thank you. I have implemented these slides a number of times, these symbols a number of times, and we were discouraged from doing a lot of explicit questions, but since I went through these slides a little bit faster than I was expecting to, I am happy to take some questions if people would like them. I will also try to repeat the questions for the benefit of the viewing audience. Is there anyone who has a question? Please. So the question is about using more common signals, maybe ones that are a little bit closer afield to where you're coming from. Absolutely. Like everything that I talked about with these symbols is not so specific to the symbols. You'll get that benefit from other systems of them as well. The important thing is to communicate them and to get everyone onto kind of a common page on them. The subtitle metaphor is really important here. It lifts them up. Also keep in mind that that subtitling effect can actually help neurodiverse individuals start to connect the signals that they're seeing and having trouble interpreting to an explicit statement of what they are. It can also help anyone to do that. Like if I had someone there basically saying, if the people in Bunclody had kind of gone to me and go, no, really, I want you to keep talking. They'd flashed up a sign going, this is the keep talking symbol. I'd have caught up that night as opposed to in the next morning. But yeah, feel free to use whatever you want. Just make sure that you kind of standardize it and give everyone a way to do it. Do I know of any good video chat platforms that digitize these symbols in some way? Zoom, which a lot of our teams use because it is better at group video chatting than Slack's internal stuff. So Slack's kind of falls over after about 8 or 9 people. Zoom actually incorporates a hand that you just put up when you want to speak next. And that actually has been useful for us. Like I said, there's bots that you can do, but in terms of video conferencing itself, I don't know anyone that does that. You can utilize so the question was, you're working with remote teams and you have a bit more of these latency issues coming up, and is there something that we can do in those video channels to handle that? These symbols do work across chat rooms. So you can actually just use them in the chat rooms. It does require people to split their attention a bit. Excuse me. It's warm up here. But you can just use them directly as symbols and say want to talk next and things like that. Almost every chat system comes with video chat system comes with a text chat that you can put these symbols into. Yeah, cross-cultural communication may also be a factor, and there are books written about that. But generally, I just use the symbols in the chat window of the video chat room. It does mean that people have to split their attention a bit. Anybody else? Questions? All right. Thank you very much. Please do give me feedback on this. I would love to hear more about it, and I really appreciate your time. Thank you very much.